All right, you guys, happy Tuesday, and listen up because it's official. Xavier Poussard, the author of Becoming Brigitte, has officially been sued by Brigitte Macron, and it's for cyberbullying. Cyberbullying, huh? And in the official report that she's filed with the police, I get an honorable mention, so I'm going to tell you all about that. Also, the Trump administration is all over the place right now. They're like, look over here, the MLK files, we're releasing them today. Look over here. Have you guys been following the Brian Kohlberg stabbings in Idaho? Yeah, well, we're demanding answers. Look everywhere. But over there, I don't know, guys, it's starting to feel like they're saying a lot of words to really just come out and say that they want us to move on from Jeffrey Epstein. And here's the thing. No, just no. So today we continue our series looking into the Epstein files. So look, this is going to be controversial. My podcast is controversial, but I've got to tell you a story and you are going to want to listen to this. It's a story about a young Hungarian boy. His name is Miklos, okay? Miklos had a bit of misfortune in his life, and I want to be clear, this was in April of 1944, so not long before the end of the war. But he and his family, along with 17,000 other terror-stricken Hungarians, were forcefully made to commute into a camp which would later come to be known as Auschwitz. Miklos was transferred alongside his brother, his mother, his father, and almost as soon as they arrived, he recounts that his mother and his younger brother were separated from him and eventually killed very quickly. He also recounts how he and his father were then made to shave their heads. They were given white tags with numbers that were on them, black numbers that were made out of cloth. Later on, he would tell that from that day forward, he lost his identity. He was no longer Miklos. He became a number. That number was 11104. Like I said, they were made to change into these working clothes, and eventually they had those numbers tattooed upon their skin. Eventually, because of the working conditions, his father just grew too weak. It was just the most insane things that they were made to endure every day physically. And so his father says to his son, look, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to survive the labor of this camp, but I want you to make me a promise. I'm paraphrasing here, but he makes Miklos promise him that if Miklos ever makes it out of the camp, he wants Miklos to commit himself to telling the world the truth regarding what they suffered. What happens next is that his father is then selected to be exterminated because he's no use, he's too weak. And Miklos says that he felt his entire body and his soul were then just worn out from this news. He then goes and he finds two other inmates who had befriended his father throughout this time. And their names were Abraham and Lazar. Abraham and Lazar Wiesel. Abraham had the number 7712 tattooed upon him, and Lazar had the number 7713 tattooed upon him. The two brothers made a promise to Miklos that they would take care of him in his father's absence, and sure enough, his father was then killed. But the three of them, they were now a band of brothers. Months later, they were informed that the Russians had managed to break through, and in January of 1945, the order came in that it was time to leave Auschwitz. Now, those who didn't have the strength to make the journey, which was going to be a very long walk, 30 kilometers in the snow, they would be left to die. They either were going to make that walk or they weren't. Like I said, through snow and through the cold. And then what happens is 30 kilometers later, they're crammed onto trains, and many of them die from various ailments until finally those that survive that long journey arrive at Buchenwald, a different camp. It was there that Miklos is reunited with Lazar, and he learns, unfortunately, that Lazar's brother Abraham did not make the journey. He was not strong enough. Here's what happens next. Days later, they are liberated by U.S. soldiers. Now, Americans listening to this, we know this story. We know the story of a liberation. It is on the fourth day of liberation that American soldiers rush into block number 57, where both Lazar and Miklos are bunked. and the American soldiers take a photo. It would become one of the most famous photos ever captured of Liberation Day. You've probably seen this photo before. After a medical exam, he again loses track of his friend Lazar. Miklos is diagnosed with tuberculosis, and he begins a long road to recovery. He gets treated in Switzerland, and he would later recount how it really took him years to treat the psychological effects, having to adapt to normal behavior again in the world. Fast forward 45 years later, and it's 1986, and a man named Elie Wiesel, is awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his work documenting the atrocities that he survived at Auschwitz. He had told the world that he was one of the inmates in the now famed liberation photo. So Miklos, who is now going by the name Niklaus, like Nicholas, begins receiving all these phone calls from journalists asking if he would like to meet up with his old inmate from Buchenwald, Elie Wiesel. A newspaper editor says, hey, we will even fly you to the Grand Hotel in Sweden for this reunion. We want to capture this reunion. And he's on the phone, and Niklaus he's a bit confused. He's going, Elie Wiesel. The newspaper editor informs him that Elie Lazar Wiesel was due to receive the Nobel Prize and that they would arrange that meeting for him to see his old friend on December 14th at the Grand Hotel. Suddenly, he is overcome with joy. I mean, can you imagine having survived that? You have lost touch. It's now some 40 plus years later. He recounts that he felt joy and he felt honor. 4 days later, his flight is booked, and he soon boards that plane to Stockholm, where he recounts that he is thinking deeply on the plane about what's he going to say to this guy? Man, I haven't seen him in so many years. What can I tell Lazar? What can we give one another, having survived this unique experience? And then finally, he says the flight went by so quickly, he hardly remembers it. Then finally that moment arrived for them to meet in the Grand Hotel. I'm going to quote him directly now. He writes, quote, after about 10 minutes waiting, the door opened, and beyond expectation, in came a man of my own age, heading towards me with a smile on his face, saying hello. I returned the smile, but I did not know to whom I was smiling at. The question regarding a handshake was hanging in the air. I made a quick move in reaching out with an attempt to shake hands with him, to say hello to him, and I finished up saying, delighted to see you. He said, Elie. I asked him in half Jewish, he means Yiddish, and half English, what language he would prefer to speak in. Jewish, I said. He replied, no. Then I asked him if Hungarian would suit him better, and he said, I can't speak Hungarian. Okay, I said, then we'll take it in English. And he opened up conveying regards from a rabbi living in Israel who was previously stationed in Sweden. His part of the performance started in front of the cameras, which I would say was professionally carried out. He was a master of his job. He's referring, of course, to Elie. All of a sudden, the reporter and the photographer joined the conversation, asked if we knew one another from before. I said no, and Elie agreed with my statement. Elie then hands him a signed copy of his book, Night. Niklaus Gruner is completely gobsmacked. He soon realizes that he's been set up as a moment of profound propaganda for this stranger who is not Lazar, who he was in the camp with. Anyways, he leaves and he begins reading the book Night, and soon after realizes that that man, Elie, is not only an imposter, but he's also a fraud. He reads the book and is shocked at the stories that he is telling that he says certainly didn't happen while he was there. He writes, quote, I had never seen, referring to Auschwitz, or even come close to ditches burning with open fire where people or children could be seen burning on my way to the washroom in Auschwitz, as written in Night by Elie Wiesel. Neither was it possible for boys of my age and with a weight of only 25 kilos to chase and to rape German women in Weimar, as claimed in Night, after the continual treatment of bromide used to minimize our sexual desires. In Night, Elie Wiesel also recounts how he, a 15-year-old Hungarian boy, threw out his Hungarian passport in front of the guards close to the Polish-Ukrainian border? Niklaus laughed at that part because, as he writes, quote, it would have immediately led to death, especially then if a Hungarian passport was even in the hands of a Jewish boy in Hungary, not to mention that a boy of 15 years was still counted as a child and was therefore entered into his father's passport if he had one. Furthermore, according to my knowledge, a Hungarian passport was protected by law against abuse, and an improper treatment would lead to a very heavy fine. Besides, one had to be at least 23 years old to hold a passport then, end quote. Niklaus then spends the rest of his life dedicated to exposing this fraud, Elie Wiesel, who he claims stole the identity of his friend, eventually culminating into a book by Niklaus entitled Stolen Identity. And he has that number, A7713, where he then reveals throughout his entire life, he then dedicates it to telling the truth. He reveals that Elie doesn't even have a tattoo. Hungarian news would confirm that. Multiple pictures show Elie wearing short sleeves, doesn't have a tattoo, which was required, at least according to Niklaus, for all of the inmates to have. He goes through lawsuits. He's suing the Hungarian government. He starts to believe that there is some conspiracy to try to platform this guy. He sues rabbis for libel. I mean, when I say he dedicates the rest of his life to exposing this Nobel Prize winner as a fraud, that's exactly what he did. And then he says he's not surprised because when Elie Wiesel eventually dies, they bury him very quickly, too quickly. And he says, yeah, they did that because if journalists had been allowed in to see his body, they would have noted that he did not have a tattoo. No, this guy stole the identity of a Holocaust survivor. So who is this Elie Wiesel who allegedly steals this identity? Who steals identities, no less, and then makes up these stories, which, by the way, it is confirmed that he fictionalized stories in his book, Night. Well, as I told you guys before, Elie Wiesel was the cousin of Robert Maxwell. Man, a man of many names, as we told you before. Man of many identities, like we told you before. And therefore, Elie Wiesel becomes a very curious piece of the Epstein story. Now enter Ghislaine Maxwell's mother, because that's how this connects. Again, this is Robert Maxwell's wife. I'm going to tell you about her. She is known as Betty. She was born on March 11th, 1921 in Saint-Alban-de-Roche, in France. Her full name is Elizabeth Jenny Jeanne Maynard, and she comes from wealth. She comes from a Lyon line of silk weaving industrialists, which were founded by her ancestor, a Swiss Calvinist merchant named Samuel Debar. Now, Elizabeth Maynard would go on in her life to explain how this mixed marriage, obviously, she was a Calvinist Christian and he was a Jew, and how the religious question arose between them as soon as they met. And she says that Robert Maxwell was relieved that she was a Protestant and not a Catholic. She writes that it seemed to have relieved him because on the whole, Protestants were not anti-Semitic, but, the Catholics were. So the story goes that she then commits herself to learning Hebrew, and she really throws herself into Robert Maxwell's ancestry. And of course, therefore, the Holocaust. Now, I should tell you now that Robert Maxwell, it may come as a shock to you, but he was not the only fraud in the Maxwell clan. Because after his exceedingly well-timed death, his wife opted to sit down for a very long, rather dramatic interview with Vanity Fair. And in this, you can see it's entitled The Sinking of Captain Bob. And she kind of gloriously arrives sitting in one of their mansions. I'm going to read directly from this article because I love this. I like to picture her, just very dramatic. The reporter writes, "She was sitting on the edge of a chintz-covered love seat, sipping tea and staring at me over the rim of her cup with her cool, teal blue eyes. We were talking about how the whole of British society seemed to be gloating over the fall of House of Maxwell. Some newspapers reported that Betty Maxwell had closed her Oxford mansion with its soaring stained glass window depicting Maxwell as Samson at the gates of Gaza and absconded to her thatch-roofed chateau near Bergerac in the southwest of France. But in fact, the iron-willed matriarch of the Maxwell family was still living in her adopted land, shuttling from lawyer to lawyer in an effort to unravel the tangled skin of her husband's financial affairs and to salvage whatever she could of her own inheritance. Elsewhere in the interview, she declares, quote, "They say that I have 500,000 pounds. Those are lies. I haven't anything." Oh, really? We're going to fact check that after we take a quick break. Throw it to our sponsors. Foremost preborn, because I've told you guys before and I'll say it again, I am pro-life. That means I stand with mothers before their baby is born and long after that. And that's exactly why I partner with Preborn. Preborn is not out to judge women. They're making motherhood possible. They provide free ultrasounds. They share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And most importantly, they stay after the baby is born with real practical support by giving expecting mothers diapers, baby clothes, even housing and financial help for up to 2 years after their baby is born. And because that is what true Christ-centered compassion looks like. Here's how you can be a part of that. With just $28, you will give a mom a free ultrasound, one chance to see her baby. And when she does, she's twice as likely to choose life. Preborn is on a mission to rescue 70,000 babies this year. Don't just say that you're pro-life. You can actually live it if you donate now. Call 855-601-2229, or you can head to preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. Also reminding you guys about GNO land, because what if smart contract platforms weren't controlled by elites or big tech? What if they were built by and for real builders, the people? That's the question that GNO Land asked, and that's why they built GNO Land. They started with Golang, a language real-world developers that already use, and they built a new platform around it. It's transparent, intuitive, and it just makes sense. Not some confusing system of ones and zeros. It's open source, so you can imagine GitHub, but designed for on-chain collaboration and composability. Builders actually get credit for their work, and they get rewarded every time their code gets used. That's the real value, not likes, not clout, actual reward. So you can visit GNO Land. They rejected proof of stake, which is a system where the rich run the show. They went with proof of authority instead. ADAO, where contributors, not bad actors or Silicon Valley, actually call the shots. GNO Land is open, fair, and honestly pretty unstoppable. So if you're a builder, a freedom lover, or just tired of rigged platforms, please check it out by visiting gno.land/Candace. Again, that's gno.land/Candace. Okay, now we're going to jump back. Betty Maxwell, husband, right as the walls are closing in upon him. They're starting to investigate him. They're realizing, oh my gosh, the pensions are missing. And yeah, conveniently timed death. And now they're saying, oh, guys, we just need time to mourn. Oh, I can't believe people think that I knew anything about it, Betty is telling Vanity Fair reporter. I know nothing about what happens in Liechtenstein. I know nothing. I have nothing. Well, the truth is actually that Betty was not broke. Betty did not have nothing. She was not broke at all. She'll never know a day of her life of what it means to be broke. As Xavier Poussard reveals in his forthcoming book about Epstein, despite the generally accepted story that after insurers refused to pay out the life insurance for her husband because it was assumed he had committed suicide, Elizabeth wrote a book called Tout soleil est amer, which means all the sun is bitter, about her chaotic family life. She also recounts how Ghislaine Maxwell, her daughter, had been treated for anorexia, like a laboratory rat, etc., all these stories. And yeah, it was told that those book sales allowed the family to survive. But the truth, as revealed in part by the Financial Times in 1992, is that she also inherited 3 apartments in France. It's also revealed years later that the will forgot to include the part where multiple properties were given to her, as well as hectares of land and forests, actually, that Robert Maxwell had acquired in his wife's name before he disappeared or committed suicide or whatever we're supposed to believe. And beyond that, it would be discovered that a financial war chest had been sheltered away for her with the complicity of the Labour Member of Parliament, a guy named Geoffrey Robinson. If you're in the UK, you might be familiar with that name because he was the former boss of Jaguar. Yes, like the car. He was also an ex-Soviet agent. He would then go on to become the future paymaster general under Prime Minister Tony Blair, very corrupt prime minister, and the Peter Mandelson, that duo. Anyways, the point is that she was far from financially ruined. So this was a performance. She was wealthy from the day she was born up until the day that she met Robert Maxwell through to the day that she died. And while she lived, I should tell you now, going back to his cousin, Elie Wiesel, she sort of rather obsessed herself with documenting the horrors of the Holocaust. In fact, according to Xavier Poussard and various other sources, it was under pressure from Betty that Robert Maxwell, while he was robbing the UK hardworking people of their pensions, he commissioned Churchill's meticulous biographer, a guy named Martin Gilbert, a professor at Harvard, to draw up an atlas of the Holocaust, which was then published by Pergamon Press in 1988. Remember, Pergamon Press, as we know, was a deep state operation. They sent Robert Maxwell into Germany. He acquires this magazine, renames it the Pergamon Press. And yeah, so suddenly they're publishing an atlas of the Holocaust in 1988, specifically all the places and all the original figures of the persecution. She also worked with Yad Vashem in Jerusalem to produce a white book of documents pertaining to the Holocaust, again published by Pergamon Press, 1988. In 1987, she then found the Journal for the Holocaust and Genocide Studies, first published by the Pergamon Press and then later on by Oxford University Press. And the year following that in London and in Oxford, she organizes a conference entitled Remembering for the Future, a world conference with the support, of course, of Robert Maxwell and the enormous resources provided by his media empire, and also, of course, with the support and alongside Elie Wiesel and others. It was a symposium that was intended to force the Lambeth Conference, which is the official meeting of the Anglican Church, to repent. She actually wrote this. This was published in a left-leaning publication. She wrote, quote, "Christians, through their churches and the whole of Christendom, are co-responsible for the Holocaust. I want the studies carried out in the world on the church to be made public. It is a matter of addressing Christians. The problem of the Holocaust is a Christian problem." She also stated that, quote, "Christian teaching, which teaches contempt, has been responsible for anti-Semitism for 2,000 years, and Christians still have not understood it." Yeah, that statement was published in Liberation, again, a left-leaning newspaper in France on April 28th, 1988. And she also clarified that, quote, "The first step for Christians is to recognize their guilt and to ask Jews for forgiveness." Okay. Anyways, in 1995, she then gets invited to be the Grand Marshal of the Salute to Israel parade. She leads the procession of the largest demonstration of support for Israel, which is held annually, by the way, on Fifth Avenue in New York. She's then appointed to become the vice president of the International Council of Christians and Jews. A lot of that going around, you know, these Christian and Jews collaborations. And yeah, that's just amazing stuff, you guys. What are we to make of all of this? We got Robert Maxwell over there robbing pension funds to support Israel, something that we know Epstein is also doing in America. They're lying. There's so many names that are being changed. We now know that his cousin, Elie, is making up things about what happened at Auschwitz. And for some reason, he doesn't want to show his number that was supposed to be tattooed. Later on, this brave guy who's taking him to task, going through courts to establish that this man was a fraud, discovers that he stole a manuscript that was written in Yiddish. He learns that Elie doesn't even speak Yiddish. Who claims that he was Hungarian, born in Romania, had a Hungarian passport, doesn't even speak Hungarian. What's going on, guys? Now we know that with him, they're establishing educational books related to the Holocaust. And speaking of education, this might be a good time to tell you that Robert Maxwell was very interested in the education of upcoming Americans, people like myself. In fact, the year that I was born, in 1989, Robert Maxwell's company, Maxwell Communication Corporation, formed a joint venture with McGraw-Hill. Now, Americans know McGraw-Hill, right? They published all of our textbooks growing up. McGraw-Hill would create the second largest textbook publishing in the United States, publishing agency in the United States. Yeah, they did this with Robert Maxwell. Of course, after he then died and the family was then thrust into scandal, McGraw dropped him as their partner. But what was the intention of that partnership? What's this guy who we know is working for MI6 and making this sort of fake publishing empire, Midas touch, pull through? What was the intention of that partnership to publish textbooks to teach Americans what exactly? It's very interesting, right? And by the way, we're talking about the deep state and their interest in publishing and purchasing all these magazines and educating us. They weren't the only people that were interested in having a stake in the education of American minds. Because remember Donald Barr? I keep bringing this guy up. Incredible guy. He wrote that fantasy series predicting Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein and human trafficking, space relations by Donald Barr, member of the OSS, which would come on to become, the CIA, right? His son, William Barr, who says, nothing to see here. Jeffrey Epstein's dead. Just, prison just wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing that day, and that's how he ended up dead. Yeah, well, Donald Barr also was interested in educational books. He published educational books as well. Just fascinating to consider. Educational books pertaining to our evolution, where we come from, the primitive man, kind of the start of we were monkeys and Australopithecus, and describing science for children, atomic energy for children. It's all connected somehow. Their interest in science and republishing science and teaching us what is real and what is fake. Anyways, now it is quite a weird thing. We all have to admit that a family of survivors of the Holocaust, allegedly, as the Maxwells were, would commit themselves to causes that were then meant to control birth. It's weird that the Maxwells would want anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. No, because he was openly a eugenicist. In 2019, it was revealed that Epstein had planned to, quote, seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating up to 20 women at a time, using his New Mexican compound as a baby ranch. And also, one of Ghislaine's siblings would marry into the family that created the contraceptive pill. Really? All seems, I don't know, a conflict of interest for Holocaust survivors. I don't know. I digress. I'm not here to form conclusions. I'm just here to tell you the story. And that's probably a good place for us to stop until we pick up things again tomorrow, because a lot of things are coming together and I'm having a lot of questions that I will maybe reserve for the book club tonight. Anyways, you guys, speaking of France and switching gears here to some breaking news, Xavier Poussard, who is also documenting, obviously, this series with Epstein and has been very good at revealing that there's a lot of perversion at the top of the French government. The biggest thing being that the first lady is a dude, right? And like a lot of pedophilia keeps happening. And yeah, she maybe fell for a 14-year-old. That's kind of problematic. Well, guess what? I told you that despite him having to pick up and move his family to Italy, he had received summons to the Italian police station telling him that they had some documents for him. Well, guess what? He got served. Yep, Brigitte Macron. This is a tweet from him. He wrote, breaking news. Brigitte Macron sues Xavier Poussard for cyber harassment. It goes on to read that summoned on the 21st of July, 2025 to the Milan office of Division of Investigations, General Investigations, and Special Operations, which is the special police in Italy. The author of Becoming Brigitte was told that he would be questioned soon following a complaint by Brigitte Macron for cyber harassment. In the minutes of this complaint, which we have been able to look up, Brigitte Macron tells the commissioner who exceptionally came to the Élysée Palace, I, quote, I don't go on a trip abroad without hearing about it. There isn't a spouse of the head of a state who is not aware of the rumor about her trans identity. Anyways, he goes on to recount that he is in fact being sued for cyber harassment. They were able to get the documents of that person who went to the Elysee Palace to question her about how she was enduring this cyber harassment, because like we told you, they're now switching gears. They know they can't win a lawsuit on libel because it's the truth, and the truth is a defense, and they're putting themselves at risk because in order to prove that it's libel, you have to prove that it's untrue, and they can't do that. They cannot do that. So instead, she's switching gears, and she's going after journalists for cyber bullying, cyber harassment, laws which they have in France, which we don't have here in America. I don't think that she's going to be able to come after me for cyber harassment, but she is trying. And she says this, when that commissioner arrived at the Elysee Palace on page 3 out of 4, you can see here, they're transcribing in English. They ask her, "Have you ever heard of Candace Owens?" And Brigitte says, "Yes, of course. And my counsel in the United States, Mr. Clare, has initiated proceedings against him," not Brigitte calling me a him, "to demand an apology and public correction or retractions. Otherwise, the proceedings will continue." Yeah, that's not happening ever. And I have been kind of asking for you to continue those proceedings because it would be pretty interesting. Like I said, you can't just be suing people down in Tennessee for cyber harassment, for reporting on the truth. I know that you guys have amassed a lot of power in France, which seems to be home a lot of this grotesque perversion that is happening in the world. Epstein's living there. Maxwell's are living there. Everyone's got a home there. They know that they can always have a home there or in Israel. It's getting pretty interesting. It's getting pretty spicy. We'll see if she comes after me, but obviously we're going to continue to report on what's happening to Xavier Poussard. Now, my best guess is it's also the reason that they won't stop is, like I said, it's all tied together. The story of the Maxwells, the story of the Epsteins, the story of Brigitte Macron and what is going on in France. And this man has been documenting it for years. So they are throwing the kitchen sink at him. We got to get him some way, somehow, at least distracted so that he's not reporting, so people don't begin to understand what exactly has taken place in this world. It is indeed, what all I can say is it's a lot of drama. And speaking of drama, there is a drama playing out on Capitol Hill right now because of pressure. We have Attorney General Pam Bondi saying she's agreed to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah, here's the headline coming out of NBC News. Deputy Attorney General will meet with Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. And she says, if there's more to figure out here, we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it. This is all fake, and you should not accept this. The moment that she should have just gone away and we could stop listening to Pam Bondi is the moment when she actually said that she was not sure whether or not Epstein could have been working for another country. Despite the fact that we have testimony in the form of Viktor Ostrovsky, who we covered. He defected from the Mossad, wrote a book, gave many speeches, speaking about exactly how he worked with Jeffrey Epstein, what his capacity was. Mossad has confirmed that Viktor Ostrovsky is not a fraud. He used to work for them, okay? So yeah, you got some evidence there. Also, Ari Ben-Menashe saying that, Epstein was brought to us. He was supposed to involve him in weapons dealing, the Iran-Contra affair. You know this, Pam Bondi, because the public knows this. So if you're playing stupid, it means that you are now a part of the swamp. You're part of the deep state. You are covering things up. And they're trying even more distractions, releasing the MLK files. Oh, we're going to now look into, here's everything. Here's a trove, tens of thousands of documents pertaining to the assassination of MLK, as if we don't already know that the feds shot him. Meant to be a distraction. I actually love that MLK's daughter, Bernice King, tweeted this. Check this out. Now do the Epstein files. No one is being distracted, you guys. We all recognize what exactly is happening, and it's a good thing. Stay focused on this because, like I said, this is the thread. This is the undoing. Everybody's going to wake up very quickly to the tapestry of deception that has been very carefully woven, especially my generation, the people that I would say, were baptized in the liturgy of World War II, now beginning to ask some very important questions which demand answers. And guess what? We're not really feeling dissuaded by you crying and saying that we're not allowed to ask these questions. Actually, I would say it's almost further committing us to the cause. What the hell happened? How much have we been lied about, and for how long? And what is this unique, strange, disgusting, perverse relationship that we seem to have with Israel? Anyways, you guys, throwing it to a couple more of our sponsors before I get into some of your comments today. Field of Greens, because one simple lifestyle upgrade that we can all make is choosing Field of Greens. If you enjoy a delicious glass of doctor-formulated Field Greens each day, you'll feel amazing. Plus, your doctor will notice your improved health, or they will give you your money back. One Field of Greens customers wrote in saying that, quote, the best blood work I've had in a decade. My doctor said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Another said, quote, for the first time in years, my cholesterol numbers are normal. If you're wondering how a fruit and veggie drink promises better health, well, each fruit and vegetable in the Field of Greens was doctor selected to support vital organs like heart, liver, kidneys, metabolism, immune system, and healthy blood cells. I can get you started today with a 20% off your order and free shipping if you visit fieldofgreens.com and use code Candace. Again, that's fieldofgreens.com. Use code Candace. Also remind you guys about American financing because costs are still very much on the rise for everything, gas, groceries, home repairs. If you're a homeowner, you probably have thought, should I call American Financing to refinance and pay off this credit card debt? Then you maybe second guess yourself because you're enjoying a low mortgage rate. But look, that low rate means absolutely nothing if you are drowning in credit card interest rates of 25% or more. That's the math that most people do not want to face, but it would be costing you thousands. Here's the truth. If you're only making minimum payments, the debt is going to follow you for years. That's why people are calling American Financing, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from credit card debt. You owe it to your family to see what's possible. There are no upfront fees. There's no pressure. It will cost you nothing to find out what you could be saving every single month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So do not wait any longer. Call American Financing today. The number is 800-795-1210. Again, 800-795-1210, or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, americanfinancing.net/Owens. All right, you guys, let's see what is on your mind today. A lot of stuff that we have just uncovered. Very interesting stuff. Marzi writes, did you hear about the guy who threatened to unalive people on the Epstein client list? He's being prosecuted by the DOJ, and I thought that was weird because there is no list. Yeah, I actually did hear about this. And then he said, oh, wait, it's illegal to threaten politicians in the U.S. Yeah, I have heard about this. Here's the ABC article relating to that. But yeah, a Florida man made death threats against people who he said were on the list. And so they've arrested him. And people are saying, hey, there is no list. So who exactly did he threaten? It is interesting. They are kind of twisting themselves into a pretzel, having to explain everything. Also, Zach Royden writes, love your work, Candace. In your interview with E. Michael Jones, he said Protestantism comes from Satanism. I attend a Protestant church. I don't fully align with either side. What's your view on gospel-believing Protestants? So obviously, you guys know I can't judge because I was a Protestant not too long ago. And what I would say is I very much accept now, on the other side of this thing, that the more that you study history, you move very quickly away from Protestantism because you start to notice that it has always been hijacked as a political movement. And I hope that in watching this podcast series, as we cover a lot of these topics, that you'll start to realize how exactly Protestantism was hijacked for political sake. As certainly while we are covering the topic of Israel and we are seeing all of these churches and these ministers get on stage and don't listen to Tucker Candace and Tucker and Candace Owens, whatever I'm being called out there, you go, okay, what is that? That obviously what has gone on here. And then there's like some common sense questions that I think like came online for me where I was just like, okay, there's so many different Protestant divisions. Clearly they can't all be correct, right? They can't all be correct. And it just seems to be splitting further and further and further. And the more something becomes divided, I would say the more evil it becomes, right? We should be aspiring to holiness, holy, things that are whole. So there's a lot there. Regarding E. Michael Jones, that sit down that we had talking about pornography, we are going to drop that onto Spotify on Friday. It's a very important conversation that we've had. E. Michael Jones. Oh, we already uploaded it. Sorry, I'm late. Was that last Friday? It is on Spotify already. If you go to last Friday's episode, E. Michael Jones is on the ADL's list. So I like him immediately because of that. I feel like we actually should be using that list maybe almost as a guide to people that we should be listening to at this point, since the ADL is just known to lie and smear. And that's what they exist for. They exist to defame people. Rose K writes, Candace, I support Trump on many policies, but he is wrong and lost my support on the Epstein files. Children should always be protected. Christ is king today, tomorrow, and forever. May God bless you in your journey for bringing truth to all. I totally agree with you. I think he's lost a lot of people. Like I said yesterday, I think he's lost complete control of his movement. And now the field is wide open for 2028. I feel that basically getting the kiss from Trump in 2028 is not going to mean what it should mean, right? If Trump's like, you should totally vote for this person, I think people are going to go, I can't trust that anymore. That's not going to be good. That's going to be a figurative kiss of death, because all of us are feeling that this is just crazy. The amount of gaslighting, the lies, making us chase our tails, trying to make us chase our tails. We're going to open up the grand jury indictment, like they said yesterday. That means nothing. That means absolutely nothing. And he knows it means nothing. So what actually gives? What is Trump on right now? I agree with you. Luke Casley writes, we do not have cyberbullying laws in the U.S. yet, but I remember that Melania Trump was working on a cyberbullying platform in Trump's first term. Yes, she was. I don't think anything ever came of it. I don't think, she definitely, I don't believe, was trying to pass cyberbullying laws. And so we are still marked safe from that. Although you could say, quite close happening on college campuses with these like speech laws, whether they were doing it for BLM or they're doing it now for Israel. That is always something to pay attention to. Will Wallace writes, Pam Blondie, we know you're watching. If there's nothing to be seen, then prove it. Release the nothing files. Yes, release the nothing files. We would like those nothing files. You're not protecting us. Oh, it's way too sinister for you guys to see. We can handle it. Please. We know that's not the reason that you guys are locking things down. Crikey writes, Candace, do you believe that Bondi will hide info or suppress info if she does interview Maxwell? Yeah, I think all of them are bad faith actors. I trust nothing out of Ghislaine Maxwell's mouth, given the history of her family, the extraordinary history of her family. And yeah, I think all of it, like I said, is just one big show. Like they are all putting on a performance right now. They will do the absolute most to get us to just stop talking about it, which is why we should not stop talking about it. Brandon Hamill writes, hey, Candace, I'm a fellow Connecticut resident, lived in Stamford my whole life and went to West Hill High School, one of the worst experiences of my life. But I love you so much. Keep doing you. Shout out to all the Stamford residents. I was Stamford High, Black Knights. So yeah, West Hill, you guys were the enemy. So the orange and the black versus the purple and yellow, or purple and gold, I think you guys were. But thank you so much for supporting. I haven't been back in a really long time. It's just hard to fly into Connecticut. That's what the issue is. Anyways, you guys, what we have following this is book club tonight. So if you've joined, we can go deeper on this topic of Epstein. It feels like a lot of the dots keep connecting, especially as we finish wrapping Hollywood Babylon. If you guys have not yet subscribed, this is going to be the last day that we cover Hollywood Babylon, and we're just kind of going to be recounting everything that we've learned in this book as we then jump into our next book, The Assault on Truth. This is the perfect time to join. You can head to CandaceOwens.com to join the book club. If you're a parent, also, you can sign up to CandaceOwens.com and look at the Shot in the Dark series. I think it's so important for every parent to watch that series when you have a child, so you are steeled against the doctors who are lying about everything, in my view, when it comes to vaccines, at least obscuring the history of vaccines, so that parents are arbitrarily fearful of diseases coming back. And that series is definitely essential. We are now moving into the birth control series. And that is something. The history of birth control is dark and it is demonic, which is exactly why, by the way, the Maxwell family is married into the contraceptive family, or was. I think they end up getting divorced, but we'll cover that in the future. Anyways, you guys, we will see you tomorrow. Oh,